All right, so about once a year in like April-ish, I like to go through my pedal board and make sure that everything's working correctly, make sure there are no issues, clean some things up, as well as probably swap some pedals out for new pedals because March is my birthday month, so I've usually bought some new pedals and want to try them out. It's also a nice time to reflect right before the summer comes and gigging season really picks up, and make sure that I'm using all the pedals that are on my board. And so I usually just it's just a maintenance thing that I tend to do. And as I was doing that this week, I thought, there are some things that I've just picked up for my own personal tastes about pedal usage and pedal boards that I think would be cool to share. And I also think it would be cool to share so that other people can share theirs in the comments down below. So first things first, these are rules that I follow, but they may not make sense to you, and that's okay, right? My purpose in creating this video is so that you can watch it and try some new things that maybe you haven't thought of before, and also so you can comment and I can try some new things that I haven't thought of before. So I'm going to give you my rules. I have them broken down into categories such as general, overdrives, modulation, delay, and reverb. And then you can feel free to comment your own kind of rules that you live by. Of course, like all rules, they were made to be broken. There are exceptions to every single one of these rules. And like I said, this is not me saying these are the rules you should live by. These are just things that I've found that have helped me know how to approach gear better. So let's get into it. Up first in the general category, number 1 comes to us from our good friend Duke Ellington, which is, if it sounds good, it is good. If you like the way a certain overdrive sounds, if you like the way a certain chorus sounds, if you like to reverse the order of your pedal board and go reverbs first and all the way up to make your overdrives last, great, do it. If it sounds good, it is good. This is all very subjective, rule number 1. Rule number 2. I'm not entirely convinced that there's such a thing as a bad pedal, especially when it comes to recording situations. Let's not forget that we got the fuzz effect from a broken channel on a control board. Someone listened to it, thought it was cool, and said, let's replicate that. And now it's on almost everybody's board. There is an application for everything, it just may not be an application for you. Rule number 3, true bypass and buffered bypass have specific purposes, and especially if you have a big board, you should probably have both of them on your board. If you have any questions about that, you can watch this video right here. General rule number 4, there are guidelines as to how you should set up your pedal board, but there's also a rule that says you should experiment and figure it out for yourself. So do that. Rule number 5, which has to do with analog versus digital. To me, there's a place for both of them on my board. So these are just the things that I've noticed about my pedal tastes over the years. Number 1, overdrives, analog. Number 2, modulation, mix of both. I've heard some really awesome analog choruses, and I've heard some really awesome digital ones. I also love the sound of a tube-driven tremolo, but sometimes gigs don't really give you that option, so you have to find a digital one that works for you. And lastly, when it comes to delays and reverbs, I tend to lean towards digital. I think that they're just a little more reliable and you can get a lot more control over the effect. Now that being said, I have had the opportunity while working in a studio to use an actual plate reverb, and that was incredible. But it's also like, I don't know, 10 feet by 4 feet, so like that's not gonna fit on a pedal board. Now we get into the overdrive section. This is one where I probably open myself up to the most criticism, but these are just things that, like I've said, I've found to be true and to be fairly consistent with some exceptions. I'm not gonna talk about the exceptions, but these are the general rules. Number 1 is you probably almost always need less overdrive than you think you do. A lot of times we like to play and practice in our rooms and we get these really cool, heavy overdriven sounds in isolation, but then we take it to a band context and all of a sudden it's just way too much and you're getting lost in the sauce. I think this has to do with the fact that overdrive inherently compresses your signal. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how overdrive works, how compression works, or even how EQ works, here's a link to a playlist where I explain all of those as succinctly as possible. But basically what happens is when you crank that overdrive up, you are increasing your compression. And what that does in short is it makes it so that your attacks and your releases of notes are just not as defined when it's over compressed. Now, compression can be used to make sure that you hear those, and that's why overdrive does such a great job. It helps us with sustain when we need it, which is a big side effect of compression. It helps us really hear things clearly, and that's why we like that boost that comes from overdrive. But when we over overdrive. And when we overcompress, that's where the attack starts to be the same volume as the rest of the note, and the sustain also seems to be that. And so when you drop it off, you just keep hearing fuzz. It's just kind of noisy. I've told this story before where I was at a show, someone had a Marshall half stack and he looked like he was absolutely shredding. But from the front of the house, all you could really hear was just distortion. There was no clarity of sound. And I really wanted to hear what he was doing because it looked really cool, but couldn't hear it. Now, that being said, if you want more overdrive, might I suggest diving into stacking overdrives. What this does is it allows you to kind of feed overdrives with different EQ characteristics into each other and create bigger, fuller sounds without it being just a ton of compression. Now, there is an art to this, and it's something that you really need to experiment with your own pedals, but generally speaking, I like to feed my heavier gains into my lighter gains. It's not like they're all on at once, but for me, I like to go fuzz into distortion, into overdrive, into like, boosty, transparent overdrive. This is, to me, where I've found the most use when it comes to stacking overdrives, but I could be completely wrong. Let me know in the comments. My next rule is that I think there are certain overdrives for certain pickup selections and certain things that you do. For instance, when I'm just playing rhythm guitar or backup guitar kind of behind the vocalist, whether I'm playing chords or doing cool little riffs or things like that, it's a different overdrive that I use from my solo sound. Also, for instance, on my board, I have the UAD Enigmatic 82, which has the ability to have kind of a preset option and then just whatever the pedal knobs are set to. And I kind of have those set, honestly, for different pickups. When I'm on my bridge pickup, I use the live mode, and when I'm on my neck pickup, I use the preset. It's just what makes sense to me. So try it out. See if you have pedals on your board that you can set up for different pickup configurations. Moving right along into modulation effects, your choruses, your tremolos, your flangers, etc. There's kind of really two main rules when it comes to this. Number one is when it comes to modulation, I think it either has to be so subtle that you almost don't notice it, or so extreme that it kind of hits you over the head. Now, there is such thing as too much when it comes to blues and rock and country, but when it comes to actually just using the effect for the sake of hearing the effect, I think that you either need to use it to just kind of color your tone, or you need to use it as the primary focus of your tone. Again, this is just me. And number two, I've never been able to find anyone who can clearly tell me what a ring modulator does. I understand that there's the scientific explanation of it and how it takes two signals and then it creates the sum of them and feeds it out in two separate alternate waves or something like that. I mean, I've read it 1,000 times, but I don't get it. And I've never been able to find anyone who can explain it to me in like a layman's term. So if you could do that in the comments, please do. Tag me and I don't know, we'll be best friends or something. Now we get into our time-based effects. First things first, delay. Delay has a ton of uses, and a lot of times I kind of like to have some always on, but usually with just like 1 or 2 repeats. It decays pretty quickly, but it just kind of gives this openness to your sound, kind of like what you get from the reverb on your amp, but I don't know, it does something a little more, and I still don't really know why, but I do it. I learned that from a buddy of mine who always had delay on, and I was like, that's so weird. And then I tried it and I fell in love with it. So try it. In my mind, when you do it correctly, you only hear the delay if you suddenly cut off a note. If you're playing chords and you can hear the delay effect, you're probably using it wrong for this specific application. Number two, when it comes to using delay for something like how the Edge uses it or how the Temper Trap uses it for their song Sweet Disposition, generally speaking, if you're trying to write a riff that has this kind of rolling rhythmic delay function, these are the rules that I think help us set up a little bit better. First off, if you're playing eighth notes, set your pedal up to dotted eighths or triplets. And then if you're playing dotted eighths or triplets, set your pedal up to be on eighth notes for the song that you're playing. And lastly, number three, when it comes to slapback, a little slapback never hurt anybody. In fact, I've found that it kind of boosts your signal a little bit, and I really like that sound as well. It's kind of the same idea as the delay always on function that I talked about at the beginning of this section. It just kind of gives your sound a little bit of width to it, which is really cool. However, there's a fine line between width and rockabilly or spaghetti western, so tread lightly. And lastly, reverb. I love reverb. From the time that I got my first Fender amp with that tube-driven spring reverb in it, I fell in love with the sound. And so there's two rules that I like to abide by when it comes to reverb. Number one, there is a distinct difference between hall reverb, plate reverb, and spring reverb. Now, there are other reverbs out there and there are differences there, but I think starting by learning those three things can be really crucial when it comes to foraying into the unknown world of reverbs. You know, there's also effects like shimmer reverb, which is really cool. But I think if you start by learning hall, plate, and spring and what those sound like and what their typical application is, you can go a lot farther with reverb than you think. Number two just kind of has to do with like why we even have reverb. The reason why we have reverb is because we want to recreate spaces, right? A hall reverb is meant to recreate a giant hall. And so there's this older technique where when you're mixing a song, you essentially set up 3 reverbs that you're gonna send every track through at different amounts. You're gonna have a short reverb, a medium reverb, and a long reverb. And like I said, you're gonna pass every track through each one of those at varying levels to create a different space in your mix. I like to think of that when I think about where I'm playing and how I set up my reverbs for a show or a recording session. I think it's worth mentioning that what I'm about to describe is not necessarily how you would use it in a recording situation. It just led me to this kind of idea. So, like I said before, reverbs are essentially used to recreate spaces. Your short reverb is recreating a smaller room, like a bedroom with a mattress and a couch and some other clothes in it. That's really going to cut down on how much your guitar reverberates in the room. It could be a smaller club that's low ceiling, and because you're super famous, is packed full of people and there's a line outside the door, right? There's not going to be a lot of reverberation in that room. Your medium length reverb is going to be probably a bigger venue, and maybe you don't have any fans. So there's a lot of reverberation happening and you're getting like, you know, 2 to maybe 3 seconds of reverb coming off of the walls. Your long reverb is likely something like a big open cavernous concert hall, right? Where even when it's sold out, it's still going to have a really long echo because you're looking at like 30-foot ceilings that everything reverberates off of, and you get like a 5 to 10 second reverb tail. Why is this important? Well, it's because when you take your guitar out of your room and go to a new space, you need to try to identify, am I in a short space? Am I in a medium space? Or am I in a long space? So let's say I go down to my local venue, 300-person venue, just kind of a rectangle. There's some sound treatment on the wall, and once you get, you know, more than 50 bodies in there, even at a 300-person venue, it does all right. There's not a lot of reverb. I would consider that to be a short room. So then I'm gonna go to my amp and I'm gonna make that my medium reverb. I'm gonna use the reverb on my amp to create that softness, that kind of floatiness where it's not drowning what you're playing, it's just softening it up. It also makes it so that your note endings aren't so aggressive. A typical spring reverb does great for a medium length reverb. If you end up playing at a venue that already has a good amount of reverb, you don't necessarily need that reverb on your amp. As far as the long reverb is concerned, that's what I would consider to be an effect. Reverb pedals that provide long reverb tails are generally used as an actual effect to give that washy, soundscapey feel. Now in the past, I've typically used like a hall or a plate emulating reverb to create that washy, pretty open soundscapey feel. However, last week I released a demo of the Spring Break reverb by Summer School Electronics, which uses a spring reverb emulation. You can watch the video here. And honestly, I've kind of fallen in love with it as my long, washy reverb tail. These are just the rules that I use to kind of guide my reverb for each situation. Is the venue that I'm in short, medium, or long? And if it's one of those 3, then how am I compensating for the other 2 options? In most instances, most listeners shouldn't notice your reverb unless you're using it as an effect. All right, that's all I got. Those are my rules, but as I said, these are just things that I've learned that I applied to my own personal situation, and I'm always willing to change them and be wrong, because that's fun, right? I would love to hear your rules when it comes to pedals. What are things that you do or don't do or swear by when it comes to setting up a pedal or using a pedal? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to learn from you guys. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the channel. Please like and subscribe if you like what you're seeing. Go make someone else's day better, and we will see you around.